All right, so we talked about the general principles, and we talked about the nutrition. Let's talk about things that deal with the brain specifically. Again, the brain and the endocrine system work very, very closely together. You have on the right side the endocrine system, the way the endocrine system works. Hormones are released from the brain and from the other 8 endocrine organs, and like insulin is released by the pancreas. Insulin works on practically every cell in the body, except probably the brain because into taking glucose. So it has to be able to fit onto the cell, the cell, whether it's a muscle cell or a fat cell, and insulin has to be able to drive glucose into the body, into the cell. Without glucose, all be damaged. In the same way, well, not the same way, but neurotransmission is different in that it's not like a hormone attaches to the nerve cell, but impulses and information are transmitted from one nerve cell to the other, cleft C-L-E-F-T, then synaptic cleft S-Y-P-N-A-T-I-C. And these are neurotransmitters. We mentioned serotonin for depression. Acetylcholine is very, very important for alertness, for general brain function. Dopamine, too, it gives you a feeling of well-being. It helps to coordinate and control the muscular activity. Of course, in Parkinson's disease, dopamine is either deficient or it's not functioning well, or the cells are not responsive to impulses from one nerve cell to the next. So this is, in terms of brain function, this is what we must look at. So whatever helps to facilitate this process is what we have to look at supporting the brain. Okay? So that, of course, would include the integrity over here. We mentioned omega-3s. That would include the production of these neurotransmitters and, of course, include the integrity of this over here. Let's go on. Keep away from what affects the endocrine system, affects the brain, what affects the immune system, affects the brain. We know that the immune system, for instance, secretes hormones too. The immune system secretes hormones which affect brain function.
David, will you remind us what P&I stands for?
Psychoneuroimmunology. Psycho means the mind, neuro means the nervous system, and of course included in that will be the endocrine system. So people actually call it PENI, psychoendocrine neuroimmunology, but let's just leave it at PNI. So psychoneuroimmunology. Okay, so the immune system also secretes hormones which affect brain function. So if your immune system is in a bad shape, it's not likely that your brain and nervous system will function well either. Same thing with the endocrine system. So when you're talking about supporting the brain, you have to also focus on supporting the PNI system. And that's what we're doing with these classes, helping people understand how each of them can be helped. So let's talk about specifics some more. The key principles in terms of helping the brain function. The key principles you have to look at are the blood flow to the brain and cell-to-cell communication. Remember that picture we showed? Mm-hmm. If you can focus on these two, you've got probably 90% of your problems taken care of. And I have a small picture here. This is not in the first handout that was sent out, so if you guys want another one, we can send you some more. Okay, so brain blood flow. The heart sends blood to the brain, and that blood contains oxygen, glucose. We mentioned glucose, very important nutrients, including the vitamins and minerals and hormones. If this is affected or impeded in any way, your brain will be compromised. But of course, if you're not taking enough in the body in the first place, you're not going to get enough in the blood to the brain either. So you have to take enough from the outside to ensure that your blood contains ample amounts to help the brain. This slide also is not in the main slide, but I just want to use this to show you that the nerve cell is connected to several other nerve cells. 50,000 is the average number they found out. So obviously this is a very simplified diagram. So this nerve cell communicates with this nerve cell and that nerve cell and that nerve cell and that nerve cell. It has to produce neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, in order for the transmission the transmission of impulses and information to go from one nerve cell to the other. If this is affected in any other way or in any way, your ability to think, your ability to respond, the ability of your hypothalamus, for instance, to receive information from the rest of the body will be impaired. Again, female brains have a lot more of these connections than male brains do. There's a key thing there. All right, Daniel Amen, we mentioned him earlier on, and I think he's got lots of great information. He's a clinical neuroscientist, child and adolescent psychiatrist, and medical director of the Amen Clinic for Behavioral Medicine in Fairfield, California. He's also, for my alma mater, we went to the same college, so obviously he must know what he's talking about. But he's a really smart guy, and so what we're going to first of all do is to look at what he has said about what the brain needs, because again, he's seen more brain scans than any other human being alive, so he should know what he's talking about, and he mentions a lot of these things in his book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. It's in most bookstores. Brain nutrients, and here's a list of the things that he thinks are very important. Vitamin B6, vitamin C and E, remember, antioxidants, very, very important. He says ginkgo biloba, the herb, which is one of the most powerful herbs in China. I mean, it's been around for millennia in China and the Southeast Asian region. He said patients or people that he has seen with the best-looking brain scans, the best-looking brain scans are those on ginkgo biloba.
Wow.
And in the notes, I mentioned some of the things ginkgo biloba does, so it's really good stuff. Alpha-lipoic acid, phosphatidol, serine, some of these things I can't even pronounce myself. Tough stuff. CoQ10, very important. CoQ10 is very important for most cells, and again, it's very important for the heart muscle too. By the time you get to be 65, you have 72% less CoQ10 than you had when you were 20 on average. CoQ10 is very, very important for muscle function.
David, in your research on your research on the CoQ10, have you come across recommended amounts? That's one of the things I just keep seeing, such wide ranges of recommendations.
Oh, okay. I know there was one.
And maybe you can include that in the notes or something, but that's, every time I mention that, I think, was it 10 milligrams or 1,000? Just there's this huge range.
Okay, I'll get that for you.
Okay.
CoQ10. Okay, all right. Well, the fish oils, because fish oils have the omegas. They found, I mentioned this, I think a week ago, that people, especially in the Asian region, who consume a lot of fish, they have the lowest amounts of suicide, lowest amounts of depression, lowest amounts of mental dysfunction. Okay, what is wrong, or what was wrong with the last picture? Let's look at that again. He mentioned quite a few things. Some things I feel, because of what we know and what we've studied, are missing, and I'm going to explain that in a while. But let's see it. Here's the way I approach the brain. Okay, I mean, who am I to challenge an expert's opinion? I don't know. But hey, information is growing every single day. So an expert doesn't know everything. He might be an expert, but there's always information that is out there that some experts don't know about. So let me try to defend my position here. First of all, I haven't been given a position yet, so I'm going to give you the position and then defend myself. All right. When you're talking about the human brain, we're going to look at the human cell again. Now, the cell is the basic unit of life, is the basic unit of your body. Now, your body has 60 trillion cells, and it has a brain. Okay, and we've talked about how important the brain is. Well, in the same way, each cell is a unit on its own, and each cell also has a brain. For years, we had thought the brain was actually the nucleus of the cell. That's this big blue thing right here. For years, we thought it was a nucleus. But until recently, and recently would be about 100 years, but it's still not widespread knowledge. Until recently, we found out that it's not really the nucleus, but actually this circular thing around the brain, around the cell, called the cell membrane, that actually coordinates, integrates, and affects the different functions of the cell, from metabolism, from reproduction to repair, to everything that affects everything that the cell does. And remember, the cell is a living thing. There are 7 characteristics of the living thing. Just as there are several characteristics of the cell, there are 7 characteristics of the living thing. What makes a cell a living thing is that it has to be able to perform all those 7 functions. And one of them, of course, is adaptation, and then another is reproduction. All these functions are coordinated, again, like I said, in the cell membrane. And if you think about it, in developmental embryology, when the cell or when the baby is developing in the body, the cell, the brain of the cell, the brain of the body actually develops from the same place that the skin of the body develops from. There are 3 layers in the early embryo. There's the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. You don't need to know that. But the ectoderm, which is the most external layer, is from the ectoderm, the brain, the human brain, and the spinal cord and the nervous system develops, but also the skin develops. So it becomes less difficult to appreciate now when you think that the skin of the cell is the brain of the cell. Just as the brain and the skin of the human body develop from the ectoderm, well, they develop in the same thing. So the skin of the cell and the brain of the cell are one and the same. Make sense?
Yes. You definitely see the parallel there.
You can see that, right? Okay. That's good. I hope everybody else sees that. So again, this whole membrane is actually the brain. You think about it this way: the skin of the cell is the membrane. MEMBRAIN is the BRAENE. Think about it that way. Anyway, all right. Let's take a closer look. Again, nutrition. Let's look at the structure, because that's what we're looking at now. The structure of the cell. When we're talking about the structure of the cell, we're talking about the structure of the cell membrane, because we're looking at the brain of the cell, and we want to see the parallel between that and the human brain. The cell membrane consists of, basically, this red thing here consists of mainly lipids and proteins. Okay, so automatically you know that you need lipids and proteins in your diet, right? Okay, lipids, of course, include fatty acids. The stalk you're seeing here, like a tree trunk, is made up of proteins, mostly proteins and or lipids. Most cell receptors are actually made up of, in fact, all cell receptors are made up of proteins, and then these blue structures here, each of these structures is a unit called monosaccharide. Mono means one, saccharide means sugar. Combination of several monosaccharides gives you a poly means many, polysaccharide chain. So the combination of these two is what makes a receptor. Now go back to what we saw with the nerve cell transmission of information from one nerve cell to the other. Even in that synapse, I wish I could, okay, let me see if I can go back to that real quick. Hang on. I should have gotten, okay. Even here, these are also nerve cells, and therefore they have receptors that are able to absorb these neurotransmitters. And those receptors are made up of proteins and polysaccharides or monosaccharides. So therefore, in answer to the question that I posed earlier, he did not include glyconutritionals in his entire list of things that are important for the cell to function. I would say because of this main factor, that the brain of the cell, again, these are receptors, but they're also sense organs. They act as sense organs. They're the ones who receive information. Again, nerve cells need to be able to receive neurotransmission. So therefore, cell-to-cell communication is especially crucial in the brain. And for cell-to-cell communication to occur, there has to be adequate amounts of polysaccharides, glyconutritionals. There has to be adequate amounts of proteins and lipids, which form the stalk and the skin of the cell membrane.